Hi everyone, before we get started, this video will be slightly heavier. I'm going to be discussing sexual abuse and women's bodily autonomy. This video will also touch on the Alex Meyers controversy, which will also touch on the movie Obsession, so there are going to be spoilers for that and Promising Young Women. I'll give some general background and context for the things that I talk about, but if any of you would prefer to watch these movies and videos first and then come back to this one, that's okay. Also, at the point that I'm posting this, Alex Meyers has taken down his videos, but there are many other creators talking about the situation in case you want a different perspective. Before I talk about this movie and what it reveals about society, I want to explain where my head is at. So I really enjoyed this film and it was genuinely well received when it came out. And then a couple years later, Saltburn came out. I didn't watch it, but I remember a lot of the more interesting scenes being all over my For You page. In the midst of all the Saltburn craze, it was revealed to me that it was directed by the same woman who made Promising Young Woman, Emerald Fennell, a fact that my brain keeps forgetting. I also forgot it when Wuthering Heights came out. Point is, these movies are very different from this one. But something that has happened recently is people are going back to Promising Young Woman to reevaluate it, knowing now that Fennell might not be the best filmmaker, which is causing there to be some not so great takes surfacing like Emerald Fennell didn't deserve her Oscar, or Promising Young Woman has too much shock value, or Promising Young Woman isn't really about anything, and things like that. So I'm going to address some of these points and also talk about the really important messages from this film. Promising Young Woman follows Cassie, a med school dropout who goes to bars and pretends to be drunk. When a guy offers to take her home and he proceeds to try and assault her, as she's presumably blacked out, she reveals that she is in fact not drunk. This is something that she does every week, and without fail, a nice guy takes her home. When she reveals that she is not drunk, she asks if he still wants to have sex, but the man usually gets defensive and says he's a nice guy and would never take advantage of a drunk girl. Cassie's best friend Nina Fisher was raped by a classmate called Al Monroe when they were in med school. Other classmates watched and recorded the assault. Nina pressed charges but lost the case, and she eventually dropped out of med school with Cassie dropping out as well to support her, but Nina eventually committed suicide. In present day, Cassie meets Ryan, a classmate from med school. He reveals to her that Al Monroe is about to be married, but he says he and Al aren't that close. This makes Cassie angry that Al is living his best life and about to go and be married, so she sets out on a revenge tour. First, she speaks to a former friend called Madison, who dismissed Nina's assault and blamed it on her drinking. Still in the present, Madison speaks dismissively of Nina, saying that she was crying wolf. Cassie watches Madison get drunk on wine, and honestly, she might have drugged her, but I'm not too sure, don't quote me on that. And she leaves Madison at the table, but gives a man a key card to a hotel room. We later see this man approach Madison. Later on, Madison sends Cassie a bunch of voicemails asking what happened to her, that she's just woken up in a bed with this man, she doesn't know what happened, and Cassie ignores them. Next, Cassie goes up to the dean of the college, who dismissed Nina's case due to lack of evidence. Before meeting the dean, she picks up a girl from high school, later revealing that this is the dean's daughter. The dean defends what she did back when Nina was alive. Cassie tells the dean that her daughter is in the same room that Nina was assaulted in, with a bunch of college guys with alcohol. The dean goes into a panic and tries to call her daughter, but Cassie reveals that she has her phone. After watching the dean start to fall apart, Cassie reveals that her daughter is actually safe and sound in a diner. Cassie then goes to Jordan Green, who was Al's defense attorney during the trial. Instead of defending himself, he tells Cassie of all the terrible things he did to discredit Nina's victimhood and win the case. He explains how his guilt has eaten at him for years and he's unable to sleep. He begs for Cassie's forgiveness and she forgives him. She leaves his house and tells the man outside not to go in to supposedly beat up the lawyer. Cassie goes to Nina's mother, who tells her that she needs to let go of her anger and live her life because it's what Nina would have wanted. And so Cassie takes this advice and starts dating Ryan. And the movie turns into a rom-com for a bit, until Madison shows up at Cassie's house distraught. Cassie apologizes for forgetting to call her back and that nothing happened with the guy who took her to the hotel room. Madison explains that she now understands what Nina went through and gives Cassie a phone with a video of Nina's attack, which had been sent to her all those years ago. Cassie watches the video and hears Ryan's voice, revealing that he was present for the assault. She confronts Ryan with it and he claims he was too drunk to remember and demands Cassie forgive him, but she doesn't. She threatens to release the video unless he tells her where Al's bachelor party is. She shows up at the bachelor party as a stripper and drugs the other men, taking Al upstairs where she handcuffs him to the bed and says her name is Nina Fisher. Al begins to panic and Cassie tells him the truth of her identity and threatens to carve Nina's name into her skin with a scalpel. She attacks him, but one of his hands breaks free and he smothers her with a pillow. The next day, Al and his best man Joe burn Cassie's body and continue with the wedding. At the wedding, Ryan gets a scheduled message from Cassie saying that it's not the end, and we see that Cassie left instructions to the lawyer on where to find her body, so Al gets arrested for the murder of Cassie. So let's talk about some of the reception this film has. I want to make it clear that I personally really like this movie, but I can admit that there are critiques and takes on it that while I can see the nuance in, I don't feel impact my overall experience with this. And even then, with these downsides or weaker moments of the film, I still believe that it has a lot of merit. And obviously, everyone is entitled to their opinion, and if you don't like this movie, that's fine. First of all, let's talk about the subversion element of this movie because I feel like this is either a positive or a negative depending on who you're talking to. So one thing that is clear is that there is a difference in how the movie was marketed and what it actually was. In the trailers, it is heavily implied that Cassie is either severely harming or killing the men who pick her up at the bar. I have a friend who doesn't really like gore who actually didn't see this movie because of this implication. Now, I'll be honest, I personally wouldn't mind a movie about a female serial killer who only kills men, but when I realized what was happening in the film, I was like, okay, so what is this movie trying to do? Now, subverting your audience's expectations in the marketing can go one of two ways. I'm going to use American Fiction and the American Society of Magical Negroes as an example. Now, I won't get into heavy spoilers with either of these, and I'll admit that I've only seen American Fiction. My point is specifically about viewer reception of the Magical Negroes movie trailer, so I don't actually need to have seen it for the point that I'm about to make. I spoke about American Fiction briefly in my Devil May Cry video, and I bring it up literally whenever the conversation steers even slightly in the direction of black storytelling. I love discussing this film. From its trailer, it seems like a movie that is discussing black stereotypes and representation. Yes, in a fresh and interesting way, but definitely still very focused on race and a critique of race. Think The Boondocks. But upon watching it, there was a whole other plot focused on Monk and his family that could have sent to people of any race or culture. With a movie discussing Monk's frustrations about only getting success and recognition when he writes quote-unquote black books, this subversion forces the audience to wonder if they would have seen the film had it not had this satirical race plotline, if it was just any other family drama just surrounding a black family that is not necessarily discussing race or critiquing race. And so the subversion added to the message and story of the movie. With Magical Negroes, the first teaser made many feel like this would be a black fantasy film. Think Black Harry Potter. Then the official trailer dropped, and it turned out it was all just an allegory for racism where black people can only use their powers to service white people, and obviously the idea was understood. The metaphor reached, but there was a collective groan specifically within black spaces because frankly this didn't feel needed or wanted. What was wanted was a movie about black people casting spells, and what was gotten was what felt like an unnecessary allegory for race which black people would obviously already understand, and it seemed like it was written for white people to understand racism, which is fine. That's what the creators wanted to do, and I can't speak for the film's quality since I didn't watch it, but this is what disappointed a lot of people. And I think this is what bothered many about Promising Young Woman. They felt that it was supposed to be this cathartic, destroying men, female rage film, and instead it was not. It didn't feel as liberating as some thought it would, and honestly, I think that this is fair. I think being turned off from the film because this is quite valid. I will still argue, though, that this subversion adds to the storytelling. We're forced to sit in the fallout of an act so disgustingly cruel, and how it broke not only the woman it happened to, but those around her as well. Also, there are many rape revenge stories or stories of women being pushed to a point that they become violent and go on a revenge spree, so the frustration with Promising Young Woman not being one of these films is different from Magical Negroes, since we still don't actually have any major stories of black people with magical powers or just existing without being used to say learn what racism is for white people. Another thing different from Magical Negroes, obviously understanding that these are two different films and I'm only comparing them from the perspective of subversion, is that I feel that Promising Young Woman is actively trying to address an issue that the subversion is also highlighting, while Magical Negroes' message made people kind of feel like, yeah, we know black people have to cater to white people to live peacefully. Can we get Black Harry Potter now? Promising Young Woman's subversion made me question why I wanted to watch a rape revenge story. It made me question what is appealing about those kinds of narratives, and it's definitely escapism, which is not a bad thing. I crave fictional media that portrays a better reality than the one that we live in. In the Ted Lasso video I just posted, I explained that I want to see a different life for women in fiction, not just stories steeped in the bleakest of realities. And I'll be honest that I wouldn't call Promising Young Woman a comfort film. What I will say is that it depicted reality in a way that isn't commonly seen, and as we'll get to later, was a necessary depiction. I think Promising Young Woman did a good job in actually depicting the reality and rawness of a situation that Nina went through. It would have been great for Nina to become a badass queen and go around beating up and killing all the people who wronged her, and it would have made for a much more comforting film. But we needed the reminder. We needed the reminder of how terrible what happened to her was, how disgusting and demeaning and dehumanizing and traumatizing it was. And for survivors, I understand that there isn't much comfort and empowerment in having the survivor in the movie kill herself, and I am certain that this reminder isn't necessary for them. But if this film is anything, it's a mirror. It forces us to reflect on how we treat and speak about SA and survivors of SA. And it reminds us that not every survivor can heal or find justice. It reminds us of why this is such a huge problem in society. What upsets us about Promising Young Woman isn't the movie, but the world that we live in. Some people are frustrated that Cassie just lets these men go instead of alerting the authorities. But then what? It is frustrating that with the situation that Cassie is in, there is technically no legal method she can use to actually stop these men. Even if she tells the authorities these men haven't technically committed a crime yet. And even if something had happened to her, it is sad and upsetting to say that the case would still likely be dismissed. I feel like I should also talk about the justice system of many countries, where there does seem to be a hierarchy of crime in which murder cases are taken more seriously than sexual assault cases. And this isn't always just because murder is seen as more serious than sexual assault, but sometimes it's because it's easier. There is no he said, she said with murder. If there's a dead body, there's obviously a culprit. But with rape, even if it can be proven that a sexual act occurred, proving that there was consent or not usually falls on testimony, which is where things get a bit murky. I'm obviously acknowledging the fact that misogyny and sexism plays a huge part in rape cases, be it male or female perpetrators. Especially female perpetrators with male victims. The way that gets minimized by both men and women is really messed up. The point is that there are practical reasons for SA being tricky that also coincide with society's dismissal of SA. So all this to address the criticism that Cassie didn't have to die, that she already had the video and therefore proof and could use that to get Nina justice. But what would actually happen? To bring in a real life example, I'll talk about a quote, promising young man. I've never actually heard that phrase being used in real life. Honestly, I didn't know that promising young woman was a play on this title for a while, like after I first watched the film. I don't know how familiar we are with the case of Brock Turner, a swimmer who sexually assaulted an unconscious woman in 2016. When the case went to court, the judge only gave him 6 months, despite the prosecutors asking for 6 years in prison. He only got 6 months in a county jail because he was young and had no previous offenses, and a longer prison sentence would have only impacted his life too negatively. According to the judge, he was a promising young man. And after that, he only did 3 months in the county jail and then got off on good behavior. I bring this up to say that the justice system has failed when it comes to SA so many times, too many times, including in promising young women. Because, fine, they didn't have the video, but it's not like there was zero evidence for the case. So while there might have been a different option for Cassie, I understand why she felt that the only way to get Al in jail where he belonged was to get him convicted of murder, because at least then there isn't a victim's validity to question. During Promising Young Woman's initial release, something a lot of people started to discuss were the drawbacks of the rape revenge narrative. 2 movies that came up in this discussion were Kill Bill and Revenge 2017. In these 2 movies, after a woman is violently assaulted both physically and sexually, and even left for dead in the case of Revenge, they go on a violent spree to get back at those responsible. I haven't seen these films personally, but what some people were saying about them is that they implied this narrative that when a woman undergoes massive trauma, she will rise like a phoenix from it with power and confidence. Now, this is completely fine if this is the movie that you want to watch or the movie that you want to make. And this is not me saying that these films are inherently wrong. What I'm saying is that it's also important for stories to remind us of a reality that we don't like to face. Going through SA, helping someone that has gone through SA, that's not always as powerful and strengthening as these stories sometimes suggest. And going on a violent spree afterwards doesn't undo what has happened. Even if it feels better for a moment, these women have suffered trauma and have not finished healing. So I want to quickly address the punishments that Cassie gives out. For the first 2 women, Madison and the Dean, nothing technically happens to them or those that they care about, and Cassie is just trying to have them truly understand what they have been downplaying and dismissing. Now, technically, the Dean only had to suffer this for a few moments, unlike Nina's mother, who watched her daughter crumble for a period of time before she eventually killed herself. And technically, Madison's suffering is also supposed to be temporary, or maybe it wasn't. I'm not really sure what Cassie's original plan was. She did also just completely forget about her. Now, something that I think we need to reflect on, and I say reflect on just because I don't truly know what the answer is myself, is whether or not the movie thinks that Cassie is a good person. Whether or not we as the audience should feel moved and impressed by her, or low-key kind of concerned for her and at times disgusted by her. I've watched this movie a couple of times. Most recently, I watched it with my friend and my boyfriend. And every time I show it to someone, the scene with Madison makes them look over at me like, whoa, 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 what's gonna happen to her? And I probably wouldn't rewatch this film if Cassie had actually gotten someone to assault Madison. But I think this also speaks to how terrible SA is. Because even for the fictional characters that I loathe with all my heart and soul, I would never want anything like that to happen to them. And again, these are fictional. Pop Culture Detective made 2 great videos on the topic of male sexual abuse in media. He made the video in 2 parts. One of his videos discussed female perpetrators and the other one discussed male. In the latter video, he said this:
When media frames the sexual assault of men, even bad men, as getting what they deserve, it perpetuates a culture of rape acceptance.
Now, I watched this when I was maybe in my mid to late teens, and I didn't find it controversial. But it was the first time that I really thought about it. That the act is so vile and disgusting that it shouldn't be done to anyone, including rapists themselves. Now, it's not like I lose sleep over the safety of sexual abusers, but I've definitely heard people say that SA is only okay when it's being done to rapists or something to that extent. But to truly understand how grave of a matter this is to not wish it upon anyone, at all, including rapists or someone as terrible as Madison. Back to Madison though, every time I watch this movie, I have to swallow in the rage that washes over me when she reveals that the entire time she had the video. Like physical evidence of what happened to Nina. Now I said before that, fine, even with this video, at the time of the initial trial, it might not have put Al behind bars or derailed his career, but at least Madison would have tried. At least she would have shown a shred of decency and humanity, especially as a woman. And I struggle with this idea of as a woman because sometimes I have to ask myself if I am holding women to a different moral standard than I do men, especially in this case because obviously someone sent her this video, so it's likely that there's other people out there, including men, who also have this video and have also done nothing with it. But sometimes it's just, as a woman, that's just all that goes through my head because where is the solidarity? How was she different from Nina? What small changes could she have made in college that would have had her in the exact same position as Nina, with other women like herself slut-shaming a victim and withholding evidence that could have brought some justice? Because the lawyer apologized before Cassie could give him his punishment, we never actually saw what would have happened to him. It's implied that he might have been beaten up, and my interpretation is that his punishment wouldn't have been the threat of violence, but rather an actual physical assault, but maybe I'm wrong. Now, tying back into the question if Cassie is a righteous character, I think the way that you see this impacts how you view this scene. If you believe that Cassie is the correct person and morally righteous, and that's what the movie is trying to say about her, then in the scene the lawyer is absolved of his sins and cured of his suffering by Cassie's forgiveness. And that is a valid interpretation. In my head, though, Cassie is not perfect. Cassie is someone who is suffering and who, up until this point, has only dealt with people who minimized their role in what happened to Nina and defended their actions. The lawyer is the first person who has shown her anything that can even appear to be remorseful. And I say appear to be remorseful because there are plenty of people out there who are very good at giving tearful apologies, like they're in agony by the pain that they have caused others, all in a performance to seem like they're sorry. So I think there's room for interpretation of the lawyer's apology. But I personally see this as Cassie being shocked and confused by his response. It's not going the way it would have in her head because she isn't perfect. She didn't predict things well enough. Some might point out the religious imagery used in this film that portrays Cassie as kind of like Jesus Christ, like in this scene right over here, which is reminiscent of the Pieta sculpture by Michelangelo, and this part, of course, and then Cassie's also dying in the end. It's mirroring Jesus' sacrifice. You might feel this movie is calling Cassie the savior or the righteous one. It could also, however, reveal how Cassie might view herself, and then maybe the scene with the lawyer made her feel uncomfortable or shaken with the power that he put into her hands to forgive him, which caused her to start rethinking her revenge plan. Or it could call out how we as the viewer watch films like Promising Young Woman, or the films that it was advertised to be. That maybe we view the female protagonist as some kind of savior for both real-life women and fictional women. Are Cassie's actions, especially her sacrifice at the end, morally just or simply just self-sabotaging? And I don't know the answer to this. That's why I love art. I love how there can be different ways to read something. This doesn't mean that all interpretations are valid and equally true, and knowing how to tell which interpretations are true is important, as we'll get to in the next big section of this video. But for things like this, we can have discussions to understand if Cassie is a savior or not. There are a lot of deep dives into this movie that are out there if you're interested. Cinematherapy's video highlighted that Cassie seems to be regressing due to her trauma. She seems almost childlike at times, like a refusal to move forward and actually move in the opposite direction, like moving back into her parents' home. A sad take I see a lot is that Cassie died when Nina did. It's sad because there is a lot in this film that can support this take. And so I don't mean like she died like we're secretly watching a ghost, like her soul died, like she's like physically still here, but like not like mentally or emotionally. Finally, a point of criticism for the punishments outside of them not really going anywhere, which I've already talked about, is that between the dean, Madison, and the lawyer, only the lawyer, the only man here, is absolved. Again, I don't think this movie is fully saying that the lawyer is absolved of his crime. If Fennell has said this somewhere in an interview that he is like fully absolved, I don't agree with that. I think that he has a long way to go to make up for the pain and damage that he caused, and either way he still can't bring back Nina. But I get what this criticism is saying. And mind you, I had a similar thought when I first watched the film. Personally, I feel like almost every feminist or female-centered story that comes out recently keeps getting accused of quote-unquote bashing men, and then you watch the project and you're like, this is man-bashing? I'll never forget when the Barbie movie came out and it was already being accused of hating men and alienating the male audience before it was even out. And then I watched it and the movie was so apologetic to Ken despite everything that happened. And Barbie even literally apologizes to him. Like, hello? And even then, some still said it wasn't enough and the movie still hated men too much. So you know what I say? Let's just make a movie where some feminist just kills men. It doesn't have to be good. Let's just have an example of actual man bashing so that other films with any level of nuance can be left alone. Anyway, back to the point of the video. Someone suggested that the lawyer and the dean's genders be swapped, which I think could have worked fine enough. I don't particularly feel as strongly about their genders being swapped either way, especially with the point that I'm about to get to. And maybe they did make the lawyer a man because they were afraid of being accused of man bashing. I don't know. Either way, I still see the importance of having a man be the one to show the most amount of remorse straight out the gate, to show men an example of taking any kind of responsibility, not putting it on your boss because you were young or because you needed a paycheck. No, actually sitting there and realizing what you did and finding a way to make amends and, showing men that all this is possible. And either way, I don't feel like the film fully absolves men of their participation in rape culture whilst solely demonizing women. But I think it's fine to call out the role that women play in situations like this. It's one thing for men to cast out a woman and berate her and harass her after an assault, but when other women turn on the same woman, especially at a time when they need that community the most, that does seem horrifying. My college and others had started doing a training for sexual assault and sexual harassment. I don't find them inherently wrong. They're definitely done in good faith. And the one that we did, it was called You Got This, and it was effective in discussing different situations of rape and fully understanding what consent is, and also talking about the violent terms that we use for sex, like smash, bang, I hit that. Those are some really good points. My main issue with this kind of training is when it comes to multiple choice questions, where it will be like, your friend Sam just told you that they think that they might have been assaulted. Do you, A, tell them it was all in their head, B, slap them in the face and call them a slut, or C, ask them if they want to make a report? Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but if you've taken a training course like this, you might know what I'm talking about. It's when it's like, yeah, I know what the correct answer is because it's the only non-incorrect answer given. I'm definitely not saying this kind of training needs to stop. I do wish it could be a little bit more realistic to what the problem is, because university students usually pass these courses. But what they don't always remind us of is that there is no textbook case of sexual assault. Sometimes the rapist is one of the kindest people you know, and sometimes the victim is someone you low-key don't like that much. Sometimes it's some girl who used to bully you, or someone who's very sexually active, or someone you've heard has lied in the past, or it's a guy, or it's someone accusing their partner, or someone accusing your best friend. It doesn't always look like sexist, jock, or incel. It's someone in your friend group who could just be an average person until they're presented with the choice to do the right thing or be a rapist, and they choose the latter option. And on the topic of the victim not being as innocent or as nice as sometimes media portrays them out to be, I have seen it happen with my own eyes, and others know this well. They know of the dangers of being an imperfect victim. The lawyer in Promising Young Woman talked about this as well, about how he and the other lawyers would comb through social media pages to scrutinize the victim to make her look imperfect, because when the victim isn't perfect, no one supports them. Women who claim to be feminist, men who claim to respect women, all of a sudden when the narrative isn't perfect innocent victim and mustache-twirling villain rapist, the way that we react to it changes. If Promising Young Woman is anything, it's a mirror. It's an ugly look at how we as men, women, kids, adults participate in rape culture, which is why we need to all be included in the discussion and take accountability for what we've done to work on being better. The movie acknowledges the rapists and abusers, but also calls into question how often we enable these people, especially when they're people that we know and sometimes like. And the casting of this film works with this idea perfectly. Something that the film has gotten the most praise for is its casting. The men cast in this film are Christopher Mintz-Plasse, best known from Superbad, and Adam Brody, best known for The OC. But I personally enjoyed his role as the objectively best man in Gilmore Girls, don't fight me on that, before he left for The OC. We also have beloved comedian Bo Burnham playing Ryan, Max Greenfield best known for Schmidt in New Girl as Joe, and Sam Richardson, who usually plays very adorable, likable, nerdy kinds of characters in comedies, like in Naked After Party. Now, this was obviously intentional. The movie didn't cast people who looked like the kind of person you'd cross the street to get away from. Instead, it casted people who we associate with beloved characters and personalities. I don't think this part is intentional, and this could just be me reading into it, but it's also interesting that there was only one black man cast as one of the people who picked up Cassie from the bars. And he was in it very briefly. And I think this is kind of also the subversion of this idea of black men being more likely to assault women or just being inherently animalistic or hypersexual or dangerous. And this reminder that there isn't a stark difference in the likelihood of a black man or a white man being a rapist or a creep in general. But there is a difference in how many Western audiences view women's safety near black men or white men. And when picturing a safe man, many often picture a white one. But again, that could just be me, doing too much. Also, while I don't know of any of Alfred Molina's other roles... Oh my gosh, wait. He's Doc Ock? Yeah, I didn't know that when I wrote the script. I've heard that he's often cast as an intimidating person or usually a villain, which adds to the subversion of this movie. A person you wouldn't expect to be scary and intimidating is a broken shell of a person. But at the same time, even then, both Cassie and the audience still get uneasy at first with the scene because this person fits the description in our heads of a scary man. But either way, the casting really helped to visualize this idea of quote-unquote nice guys, people who don't look like they'd be rapists. You feel comfortable around them. You're friends with them until an opportunity presents itself for them to take advantage of a woman, and they do. And it's this kind of man that Bear from Obsession is, and ultimately what Alex Meyers missed in his review of the movie, but let me not get ahead of myself. Ryan is a character who gets worse the more you think about him. Not only was he present at Nina's rape and still friends with Al despite downplaying their closeness to Cassie, because mind you, he had the location of the bachelor party, so it's also heavily implied that he was invited, which, I mean, if you're not that close, why are you invited to his bachelor party? Because I just in case people thought that he was being correct, like he didn't remember what happened to Nina, like he definitely did. He's been lying throughout the whole film, and he knew what version of events to present to Cassie in order to score romantically with her because he wanted to date her. So he didn't tell her the truth that he was present at the assault. He didn't tell her that he's still friends with Nina's rapist, that he didn't cut ties with him after all that happened. He also lied to the police when they told him that Cassie was missing. At first I thought this was because she told him not to tell the cops about her going to the bachelor party, but the party's over at this point, and now the cops are coming to him, and he can't just point them in the right direction. Mind you, Cassie could have been alive, and telling the cops could have saved her life. See what I'm saying? He doesn't actively have a malicious, do-nothing-but-evil agenda, but whenever he's presented with a chance to do the right thing, he doesn't. Sound familiar? Hold on, let me get there. Let me also speak about Al Monroe, whose appearance doesn't come in until right towards the end of the film, where he is juxtaposed with the other men of the bachelor party who are loud and very intoxicated. He insists that he didn't want a stripper, and honestly, if his reluctance to follow Cassie upstairs was an act, give him an Oscar. I will be honest that at some point I thought that they were going to reveal that he wasn't the one who did it. The film is very intentional in not showing what happened to Nina, and I will always appreciate when something as graphic as that isn't shown, but at the same time sometimes I wonder if that was intentional to, again, make viewers question themselves. Do we need to see the act happen to know that the person who did it is a disgusting monster? What does it take to make us question that? A nice smile? A decent personality? And when Cassie lurched at Al, I questioned if him turning the tables on her was an act of self-defense, but by the end, when I realized that Cassie was dead and gone, and seeing the undignified way that Al and Joe disposed of her body, I understood that I just fell for the nice guy act. Let's break it down in case some people are confused. First off, Al did the rape. No arguments there. And this wasn't like she was a little bit tipsy or had a sip of wine. From the descriptions given, Nina was a blackout drunk and could barely hold her head up. So maybe it wasn't an act. Maybe he didn't want to strip at his party because it's weird and kind of soft cheating. And maybe he is a decent person now. But he did rape Nina. He didn't go to jail for it. He fought the case in court. So it doesn't matter how much he's changed as far as I'm concerned because he still did that. I mentioned earlier that Nina being raped is never shown, but Cassie's death is. Now some people still don't like how this was done. They found the scene discomforting and gruesome, and that is valid. This was a lot. But personally, I felt that it was necessary. But even then, I feel like it didn't relish in showing this violence. It didn't show her eyes rolling back or the color draining from her face like certain filmmakers like to do. We don't see her face though. After Al puts a pillow over it, we never see Cassie again. But this scene is still so difficult to watch. But how could it have been made easy to sit through? And why should it have been made easy to sit through? Even when Cassie watches a video of Nina, she doesn't ever fully look away. I don't know if she felt the need to endure it all for moving on without justice, kind of like the guilt and trauma that she was left with coming back again. Either way, we don't see what she's saying, but this is still such a gut-wrenching scene, and seeing Cassie's reaction alone is enough to understand how horrible the video must have been. But I feel like there wasn't an alternative like that for Cassie's death. We as a viewer need to be reminded of what it means to smother someone to death. This isn't a quick gunshot to the head. This takes time. Time that you could rethink what you're doing. Time that you could release the pillow, leaving her unconscious but alive. Time that we hear her struggle, that for 2 minutes we question if she will make it. Time that we realize what a real monster Al is. As said earlier, because we never see Al's violence, it's hard to believe it exists. Show, don't tell, and all that. And in the case of Al, again, we're seeing him for the first time towards the end of the movie. He seems polite and kind. Anyone had shown me that scene out of context, not knowing what he did to Nina, I'd be like, oh, he seems like a chill dude. And again, we didn't see what happened to Nina, and that mirrors real life as well, because when we don't have enough evidence of a rape occurring, or we don't see the assault happening, we're less likely to believe it. We're more likely to be like, okay, well, someone must have seen it, and if no one saw it, then probably didn't happen. But this scene in particular is where we see Al's nice guy facade fall completely. When I first watched it, I thought it was self-defense. But upon rewatching, I remember that Al doesn't care about his life in this scene. He cares about his image, his reputation. Cassie had the video and she told him this. But let's say he feared that having Nina carved into him would kill him, and he smothers Cassie in self-defense. He's clearly shown that he can overpower her even with one arm, so he could have gained control without her necessarily being killed. But even then, even if he had to kill her to survive, Why, oh why, did he not just tell the cops this and instead opt to burn her body? This is the same thing I'll bring up when I get to Obsession. The way people react to things is very telling of their guilt. Some are gonna say, but you don't know what the cops would say. Maybe they wouldn't buy it. As if it hadn't been established that Al knows very powerful lawyers. This isn't about self-defense or not, it's about the fact that Al knows that he is guilty and he doesn't want to face any consequences. So that was a lot about Promising Young Woman, and I argued earlier that its message is still relevant today. I was reminded of this fact because of the Alex Meyers situation. So I normally like to take a break between my videos. I usually get too hyperfixated when I'm working on one and it makes it hard to focus on other things like eating and sleeping at a regular hour. But as fate would have it, I didn't get much of a break this time since I posted my last video mere minutes after Alex posted what seemed to be an apology video. For those who don't know, Alex Meyers is a YouTuber who often does animated reviews of movies and TV shows. Now, I've been watching Alex for a while, since back when his icon looked like this. And so this whole situation has been quite personal for me. I was subscribed to his channel until recent events, but I stopped watching his videos regularly like a while ago. No reason in particular, I just wasn't connecting with the videos as much, and sometimes I just didn't care for the video topic, like for Obsession. I hadn't seen it, I don't watch horror. I've been seeing a lot about it online, not actual discussions of the film, but posts about how much discussion there is about the film. I don't know if that makes any sense. Point is, I had no idea what it was about at all. I assumed it was about an obsessed girlfriend from the posts, but I didn't have any more knowledge than that, and I didn't feel the need to. So I'd seen Alex's Obsession video on my feed, but like I said, I don't regularly watch his videos anymore, especially not when he's talking about something that I don't really care for. So right after I posted my Ted Lasso video, I clicked on the apology video, very confused. My sister came and looked with me also to know what was happening, and then he said this.
I'm sorry if I worded my video in a way that made it sound like I am defending rape or pro-rape.
You can imagine my confusion as to why he could possibly be saying that, so I went over to the actual video and watched it for a bit and scrolled through the comments, again so unbelievably confused. For context, this happened at like 3 in the morning my time, so I decided to go to sleep and follow up on it more in the morning, and by morning I do mean afternoon. Early afternoon though. Please don't jump down my throat, but I still did not watch Obsession. I'm sorry guys, I really can't do horror and jump scares, but I did read through a summary of the film, then I watched the Obsession video, then I watched the apology. I will not claim to be able to engage in the most detailed analysis and debate about the film, but I can say that I feel confident enough to discuss the Alex Meyers situation. I'm going to go over the situation as best as possible, but I'm going to try to keep it brief because this video is long enough. There are so many videos out there talking about this, which I recommend watching, and I'm going to try my hardest to also add newer points instead of only repeating what is out there. Also, in case anyone thinks that this is being blown out of proportion or that we can stop talking about the Alex Meyers situation now, I think at this point in the video it's clear that this matter needs a lot of discussion. It's not a light matter. This isn't to dunk on Alex or call him a bad person or send any hate his way. It's just to make sure that we're truly understanding the impact of the video that he made. So Obsession is a horror thriller that came out this year and follows Bear, who makes a wish on the wishing willow thing that he bought at some strange store, and he makes a wish that his friend Nikki will love him more than anyone in the world. Immediately after he makes this wish, Nikki starts acting really weird, invites herself over to his house, sleeps in his bed. At some point she kisses Bear and then instantly freaks out. She does a lot of weird things in the movie, by the way. Bear's cat had died and she takes out its remains and puts them in a sandwich. She pees herself waiting for him to come home. A lot of weird stuff is happening and she is clearly not in her right mind. Bear eventually asks if Nikki loves him more than anyone in the world, making it clear that he now definitely knows that she is behaving this way because of the wish. He calls the store that he got the wishing willow from and asks to alter his wish, so basically that's that Nikki can still love him but not be so crazy, but they say it's not possible. He asks to cancel it and they say no. The only way for it to end is if he's dead. They also ask if he wants to speak to the real Nikki and he hears her screaming on the phone. So Bear continues to have a relationship with Nikki, including sexual relations, which in this case is SA, since he fully knows that Nikki is not in the right state of mind. At some point Nikki knocks herself out, and when she comes to, she tells Bear that she is the real Nikki and the other spirit thing that has possessed her is sleeping. So some of the times that she's acting weird is kind of like the real Nikki fighting for control over her body. She tells Bear to kill her so that she can be free, to which she asks if it's that bad being with him. After the spirit of Nikki comes back and has killed 2 of their friends, Bear tries to get her to pretend to be Nikki, but that still doesn't work, so he decides to take a bunch of pills to kill himself. But then he takes it back and tries to throw them up, but Nikki then gets a wishing willow and wishes for Bear to love her the same way that she loves him. This causes Bear to not fully throw up the pills, and he's with Nikki for a moment before he dies, freeing Nikki, and then she's just sitting in the blood and carnage of everything that happened, and she screams. So Alex Meyers made a video about this movie, putting a disclaimer that he knew the internet was already up in arms about it. Basically, his whole thesis is that Bear isn't the bad guy until a certain point in the movie, and spends the first part of it defending a lot of what he does. There are times in the video where he either misrepresents information from the movie or actively omits certain parts. If he did this intentionally to make his claim that Bear isn't all that bad work, that is obviously messed up, but if he just misunderstood the movie and the way that things play out, that doesn't inspire confidence in his commentary skills, so you can understand why people have been upset about this. I also find it interesting that my primary knowledge of this film is the Wikipedia summary and Alex's video, and even I could tell that this wasn't consensual. In his apology, Alex says that he doesn't feel the need to focus on the rape scene that happens after the diner because he already said that Bear was a bad person. The issue that he did briefly mention it when he said the devil's tango, which is the phrase that he uses in his videos when talking about sex. The problem is that he referred to the scene as sex even though that implies consent. If there is no consent, then it's not sex, it's assault. And not to harp on him because he did correct himself in the comments, but in the original apology video, he still refers to it as sex. Again, he says he slipped up, but we couldn't do another take, especially for that part in particular, because that is the main thing people had a lot of issues with. I'll also quickly touch upon other issues in his video. Alex calls Nikki a hot Latina or Latina mommy multiple times throughout the video. At some point he also says because she's a hot Latina, Bear could only resist her for so long. This would be weird for any video, but it's particularly frustrating when talking about a film that features this Latina woman being assaulted. Also, Alex knows that Nikki is basically possessed, and when she has the whole breakdown in the diner, he says this.
Okay, see, Bear, I don't know why you're making this face. You wanted the Crystal Mommy Latina experience, and you got the Crystal Mommy Latina experience.
As if Latinas are so crazy that they might as well be possessed by a demon, there'd be no difference. Now, he does say Crystal Mommy as well, so I know the implication is that it's the crystals obsession that makes her crazy, but then why add the Latina part? In his video, he says that this joke was, quote, conceived by a Latina woman in Central America. And I'm wondering what that has to do with anything, because he is not a Latina woman as far as I know. You know in The Office, episode 2, when Michael does the Chris Rock bit of black people versus... well, you know the rest. It doesn't matter that Chris Rock wrote the joke and he's black. The issue is that Michael, a white man, is saying it. So it's fine if a Latina woman came up with this joke, but Alex telling the joke is a problem. His apology also included I'm sorry if, which immediately doesn't feel like a genuine apology. After he said he doesn't condone rape, reading this off the phone by the way, he said, I didn't think I had to say that, which didn't feel too sincere. And also the accusation is that he minimized SA, called the assault scene the devil's tango, and gave Bear credit for not jumping at the chance to take advantage of Nikki, then yes, I think his viewers might have been a little bit confused on his stance on the matter. Another thing that frustrated others and myself about Alex's video is what felt like a refusal to consider that Bear knew about the wish before the diner scene. But from the clips that he showed and clips that you can find online, he at least had an inkling. The very first night he looks up the wishing willow thing, implying that he had a suspicion that the wish is what is causing Nikki to behave this way. Yes, as Alex pointed out, Bear asked their friend Ian about Nikki acting weird out of concern, but he leaves out the part where Bear lies that he didn't sleep in the same bed as Nikki because he knows that he's going to look like a creep. Alex gives Bear credit for doing the noble thing of taking pills to free Nikki, but he leaves out the part where Bear tries to throw them up again before Nikki's wish stops him. And also, it was really frustrating that Alex had this whole, it's only a movie thing in the video being like, oh, everyone's so obsessed with this, as if he was going to make some neutral summary of the video, but he himself took a stance. He was playing Bear's defense attorney for some reason, and when people said that his takes weren't correct and that they were harmful and frankly concerning regarding his views on consent, all of a sudden it was just a movie and people are doing too much. The comments under the apology video and the comments under the obsession video are very different. He also claims that he isn't putting him in a position of he's not a politician, he's not a position of power, he's just a guy making YouTube videos, but he had 4 million subscribers when he posted the video. Is it that crazy to think that it is important for him to engage in discussions surrounding consent and rape culture responsibly? Hello? Hell, even if he had just 3 subscribers, that's still a platform, and publicly or privately, we should all practice responsible discussions about the topic. I want to briefly mention Alex's 13 Reasons Why videos. You might not know them, they were made so many years ago, but the format of them is very different from his usual style. And he was still doing the animated reviews at the time. He just switched it up for 13 Reasons Why because the video called for it. His voiceover also sounded very different, not very made for animation, but it felt more like his usual everyday speech and a little bit more sincere. The video was structured more like a video essay because of the heavier subject matter. My point is that he understands the heavier subject matter deserves a different style of video. While I'm here, 13 Reasons Why also features sexual assault, the main perpetrator of these assaults being Bryce Walker. I was going to put a spoiler warning for this, but no, don't watch the show. It's truly not worth it. The point is that it would look ridiculous if Alex made a video where he defended Bryce or pointed out some of his winning qualities, like, to his credit, he was nice to his mother. He wouldn't do that because I'm sure he understands how messed up that would be. This example of SA is from a misogynistic jock character who forcibly rapes 2 girls that we know of, and one of which was blacked out the whole time. So good on Alex and other reviewers of 13 Reasons Why for picking up on the fact that Bryce is a rapist. The issue is that not every abuser looks and acts like Bryce. This is the problem, and this is why people are discussing obsession this much, because it's revealing who can't identify an abuser when they are wearing different clothes, when they don't act in the typical I'm a raging misogynist kind of way. It bothers me that in Alex's head, and a lot of people from what it seems, Bear and Bryce are not the same kind of person, and that they didn't do the same thing, even though they literally did. Also, while I'm here, this is a funny coincidence. In all the Alex Meyers drama, some people are bringing up his Turning Red video, which also had some not so great takes.
A hot water bottle and pads. Regular, overnight, scented, unscented, thin, ultra thin with...
You know, I do think it's kind of funny how girls complain about, like, why do you guys think we just sit around talking about our periods all the time? Like, that's so stupid. But then, like, this movie comes out and they're like, oh, wow, finally, a movie about periods. I'm gonna watch it 5 times in a row. Hey, look, there you go, ladies. Friendship cures periods. Why didn't anyone think of that before? It's like, again, you know, if you keep following along with the period metaphor, like, this movie is absolutely wild. OMG, May, you got your period? That is so cute. Can I see it? Or like this dude later on who's like, hey, I'll pay you $200 if you come to my birthday party and show off your period.
How could she do this to her own mother?
Oh, the seal is broken, the panda's coming out again. Menopause is over, mom's back in the game.
So in my Ted Lasso video, I made it clear that there was a male YouTuber who made a not so amazing video on Turning Red. To be clear, I wasn't atting Alex Meyers. I was talking about someone else, but unfortunately, many male creators who talked about this movie expressed similar sentiments. They completely missed the point and dismissed it as a film about periods, which it isn't. But even if it was a movie about periods, what exactly is the issue? It's big 2026, and that movie came out in big 2022. Yeah, we need to stop being weird around periods. Also, considering in Alex's video, he literally mentions periods for the rest of the video, more than the actual movie, so clearly you can talk about periods, so then what's the issue here? And if the period metaphor isn't making sense in the film, wouldn't that mean that the red panda isn't a metaphor for the period and you just misinterpreted the movie? It doesn't fully matter who I was referring to with the Turning Red commentary. The reason I brought it up in the last video was to give an example of men not knowing how to empathize and understand women, especially when Mei and her friends are cringy and kind of a little awkward at times, just like all the men that Alex Meyers attaches himself to. And to bring up Pop Culture Detective again, he highlights why this is a problem.
Now, if it is a problem that young boys are having trouble identifying with girls, that's all the more reason why this kind of project should be greenlit. And not only this project, but thousands of others like it. If young boys are having trouble seeing girls and women as people, then that represents a massive problem. Not a surprising one under patriarchy, but it is a huge cultural issue. So media can play a small role in helping us shift away from that, right? It's not magic, but representation isn't everything, but it can play a role. Blockbuster movies that focus on the experience of girlhood that are made for a general audience are obviously very important for young girls. But I'd argue they're equally important for young boys to see. Because boys need to learn how to identify with women. They need to learn how to be inspired by women. As a culture, we need to engage in a process of rehumanization. We need to rehumanize women and girls. Now, we shouldn't have to do that. We shouldn't have to humanize humans, but here we are. Women and girls have been dehumanized for so long in so many pieces of media and elsewhere that drastic steps have to be taken to root out the misogyny that has taken hold.
I think it's fine for women to relate to a female character and men to relate to male characters, and this is natural. But at the same time with fiction, you learn to empathize with those who aren't you. And if you can't have empathy for someone in fiction, how can you have it for someone in real life? So in the case of Alex Meyers, it's fine if he was once in Bear's shoes pre-wish, but can't he map onto a different character afterwards? He can't relate or imagine what it would be like to be in Nikki's shoes. You know, I don't have a brother and I've never lost a sibling, but I could still understand what Hero was going through in Big Hero 6 because that's what empathy does. I also think that Alex and some other people who have spoken about this movie like to play up the tragedy that Bear is going through. His grandmother dying recently, and then his cat dies as well. A brief aside that there is a lot of discussion about both the grandmother and the cat, specifically the cat, because the cat died because it ate a bunch of pills, but these pills are like child locked, so it's likely that Bear left them open and out, and that's how the cat got into them. I also think there's a bit of analysis on like when he finds the cat, because the cat is like so much of like cat food spilled around, which also kind of implies that he wasn't feeding it and like he like had to like rip open the bag. That's not necessary for this video, but this idea does add a lot more to Bear's character, and specifically his innocence and lack thereof due to his negligence of the things that he claims to care about. Either way, I understand that he has suffered tragedy and is awkward, but that doesn't excuse any of this. Promising Young Woman went against the nice guys, the kind of guy you can sympathize with. You know what he's been through, how hard it was for him in high school, where not many girls wanted to date him, but he's so sweet and genuine. A guy who,
To his credit,
didn't assault Cassie in the bar. No, instead he took her home to make sure she got back safe, and then he proceeded to try and assault her. It doesn't matter that Bear didn't assault Nikki here if he will do so a couple moments later in the film. Imagine being like, Your Honor, yes, my client assaulted a woman on February 5th, but on January 12th, he walked the same woman home and made sure she got back safe. Do you hear how insane that is? It also kind of reminds me of like in adolescence when Jamie is confronted with the fact that he like killed a girl, and he said, well, most guys would have raped her and then killed her. Do you hear what you sound like? That's what it sounds like when people are like, oh yeah, okay, but like another man would have like raped her like repeatedly, but like he only did. What do you mean? If you have to compare yourself to a literal like monster to make yourself feel better, you're not a good person. That doesn't make you a good person. That's just a comparison. Also, Bear's reaction to Nikki being like, well, I didn't take advantage of you. Or when she jumps back horrified and he says, you kissed me. These felt extremely defensive, kind of like the men in Promising Young Woman. He knew for sure that he would have let it go further had Nikki not jumped away. He knew he was being a bad person, that he was doing something wrong. That's why he was so defensive. That's why he lied to Ian. He knows that he is guilty. Promising Young Woman is a mirror, and Obsession is proving to be one as well. If you relate to Bear as this nice guy who is well-meaning but socially awkward, then instead of defending him, see the movie as a cautionary tale for you not to make the same mistakes Bear did. If you believe it, a kids show called Centaur World was one of the first times I had seen a villain being given a backstory so complex and nuanced, whilst also fully reminding the viewer that he should be held accountable. I'm going to keep this light on spoilers because I think that Centaur World is worth the watch, even if it's only for the series finale. The main villain of the series, who has one of the most cursed designs I've ever seen, is called the Nowhere King. His existence is referenced throughout the show in this creepy and chilling lullaby, and not much is explained about him except for all the pain and destruction that he has caused. In the final episode, we learn of his backstory, one that involves his love for a woman and his desire to make her love him. Now, unlike Bear, he doesn't try to alter the woman, instead he alters himself, which is where things start to go wrong. Both the Nowhere King, Bear, and many quote-unquote nice guys have the problem of attaching their worth and validation to an external source, usually a woman, which is a problem. In the case of the Nowhere King, I related to his story a lot. The idea of not feeling worthy enough of love because of what you look like and wanting to change parts of yourself is relatable and understandable. But Centaur World reminds us that, as sad as it was, and yes, at some point he really did lose his mind, the Nowhere King still caused all this pain, and he had to remain accountable for it. Instead of defending him because of how much I related to him, I took this as a teaching moment to hear whatever negative feelings I have about myself and not allow them to cause others pain and distress. People have responded to those online who call Bear an incel and have pointed out that it is somewhat problematic to do so. So, okay, fine, he's not technically an incel, but he definitely isn't a good man either, and unfortunately, he represents the average man, which is a problem that we should be talking about. If the average man would be okay with taking away a woman's autonomy if the opportunity presented itself, that is a problem. That is something that we should be talking about. This isn't like someone wishes for something and they realize what's wrong and then they turn things back. No, there's no reversing the wish here. And something that many are saying was a harmless wish he didn't think would work affected everyone in Bear's life negatively, especially Nikki, who is now forced to live with that. Finally, yes, both these films are fiction. I get it, I know. But do we understand how insane it is to say the wrong thing in a fictional setting? It's hypothetical, made up, and we still can't find the right thing to say? It's like getting the "you got this" training question wrong. How we respond to films like this fully reflect what we think about SA in a real setting. All this just to say that this whole situation has proven that we still fall for nice guys, that people out there are still falling for the nice guy act. That if a man is slightly kinder or more shy and awkward, it's like, oh, you poor thing, and like we have a lot more sympathy for him. And even when he does bad things, fine, yes, people aren't saying that Bear did nothing wrong, but they're also trying to see the quote-unquote nuance in what he did, but there isn't any nuance in sexual assault. I mean, like, if it's bad, it's bad. But this is my point as well, that it's insane to me how, because of how quote unquote nice he is, people are actually making all these takes, defending him and sympathizing with him so much more, rather than the actual victim of the movie. Like, I haven't actually seen enough from these people who are saying, oh wait, Bear wasn't really that terrible of a person, he wasn't really this. I haven't seen enough of those same people take a moment to actually understand what Nikki is going through, and that is absolutely terrifying, that he is given more sympathy and understanding than an actual victim of sexual assault. Again, I am understanding that this is fictional, but that actually makes this worse. And so my question is, when someone sexually assaults another, why do we feel the need to focus on their good qualities? And this is my thing, like, this is why I keep putting nice guy in quotes, because I don't care if they rescued a kitten from a tree. If they raped someone, they're not a good person. They're not a nice person. And that whole nice guy thing, that's definitely an act then. Because if you truly were a nice guy, there wouldn't be an assault to talk about. If I have said anything in this video that rubbed you up the wrong way, or if you felt something wasn't worded well, please call me out. I'm not claiming to be an expert on anything. And if I got something wrong, I want to know. Thank you very, very much for watching this video. I swear I need to actually not post anything for the next month. Yeah, like I said, this situation isn't fun for me. I really, really, really did like Alex Meyers' videos. And this has been disappointing for sure. I'm glad that there's a lot of commentary out there about this. There was one video I saw where someone was saying that people are doing too much and being too mean to him about this, and I'm I don't know what we're doing here. Please let me know what you thought, what you think of the situation, if you feel like it was a fair link to make between Promising Young Woman and the whole Alex Meyers situation. Yeah, I think I'm really tired of people saying, oh, this person did something bad, but they're not as bad as this person, therefore they're okay. That's not a thing. If I'm calling you out for what you did, please don't tell me about that there's worse people in the world. There's always going to be someone out there worse than you, but there's also someone going to be better than you. And you should also aim to be better, if that's any takeaway. Until next time, I'm just a squirrel, and thank you so much for watching.